Hey guys, Ricardo here, and in today's tutorial guys, I have a special one for you and I'll be comparing the fake AirPods versus the Gen 4 AirPods. Now of course, I have two sets of AirPods here, and please note that this is only for educational purposes. I'm not promoting any fake products, and of course I highly recommend that you get the original as they are way superior in terms of quality and of course in terms of the features. All right, so please don't ask where I got them. This is simply so you can identify the fake versus the real, especially if you were to purchase one online and you'd like to compare them one to one. Now, of course, I got my original AirPods with ANC, and I have a fake that was bought. Now, in terms of the fake, it was identified as AirPods 4, so we'll actually see what we get. All right, so here we are. So we're gonna get straight into the unboxing. There's serial information, I'll not be showing that. All right, so the fake is right here, and of course this is my original, which I've unboxed separately. You can check that out. So I'll be here only for comparisons purposes. All right, so let's look at the boxes. All right, so first of all, we notice that it goes ahead and it has the Apple logo, and of course if we were to turn to this side, we see the same thing. Now of course this one says AirPods, which is the original, that says AirPods active noise cancelling, and this one says MagSafe charging case. All right, if we were to turn again, we see the Apple logo. All right, and if we were to turn to the other side, we see the serial information. I'm not going to show that side. All right, let's look at the top of the box. Now one of the first things I noticed, this one is still in the plastic, and of course you can see both here. Now you can notice a size difference within the boxes, and of course they differ in size. I do not know if that's common or if because something else in terms of probably the way they were presented. All right, we're gonna look at the back. All right, so let's look at the back. All right, so right away here, I noticed that this one and this one differs. And the reason why they differ here, notice that this one, the fake, actually has a picture on it, and this one does not. It does identify here that this is actually. All right, so on further notice, it does say here that it's a third generation. So this is a fourth, and it's saying that this is a third generation. However, the product information had said that this was a fourth generation. So of course that may have been some mismatch, but we can still compare them because they should be able to use the fours to identify. So they say these are threes, so we're gonna still check them out. All right, next I noticed that it says here that it's compatible with iOS devices, and it says Apple Watch or Mac, and of course it also said something about Qi charging, and of course it goes on to say a bunch of stuff here. You can always pause, zoom, and read, or just pause and read. All right, so straight away the iPhone 17, sorry, the iPhone 17 Pro Max is about the width of the ANC or the AirPods 4 box. So it's about the width, and if I compare here, this one is about a width and leaves about the space for a finger at the side for a rough estimation of width. All right, so I'm going to remove the plastic. So one of the things I noticed is that in terms of the plastic that's on this is that there are some extra stickers, especially this one, but it might be the country of origin. Do not ignore the cut, as this is just something I had to scrape off. There was a tag on this that I had to remove. All right, so you see here, it does say all the Apple stuff, except for this sticker here, that's an extra. All right guys, so you can see the plastic that I just removed. So let's check this out. So of course we're going to open up this box, and this is the fake. So first of all, I forgot to tear off the seals, so let's go to that. Now let's compare the seals that came on this one, although they are removed. So you can see the tabs on this one. It's very, very neat, and everything is perfectly aligned. I noticed with the fakes, it's just slapped on. You can actually see here that it's misaligned, and down here this one is much better, but it's still not as perfect as the remaining tabs on this one. So attention to detail is one of the things I know that stands out on this. So first of all, again too, I noticed that on the original, this thing is not printed on. It's actually a raised surface. You can actually feel it. It's as if it was branded into the box to give a 3D effect. So you can actually feel a rise. For this one, there's nothing. It's as if it's just printed on. You can actually feel the rays over here. In this one, you do not feel anything. This seems as if it was printed on. This actually looks quite high definition. This one looks just as if it was just stopped on or printed on. Also, when you feel the Apple logo, it's very smooth. On this one, you can actually feel the box. All right, let's continue. So we're gonna open this. Okay, first of all, that would never happen to an Apple product. The removing of the tab, it will never tear like this. It's very thick. This is very thin. All right, so if you're gonna remove this, as you can see here, it's prematurely torn. And if I tear here, it happens again. So the quality of the box, it's very, very flimsy, and you can actually see that it's tearing the branding stuff here, as if this box had a very cheap thin film. And you can see here with this cut as well, it lifts up very easily, so it's just thin paper. All right, so check this out. So we're gonna open up now, and that's the other thing. Apple products simply slide out of the box. This box is actually resisting being open. All right, and you can see what I mean here. I have never opened an Apple box and it resists opening. It's always just 2 tears and that's it. All right, guys, so it's very difficult to open. I had to employ a knife, and even now that it's loose, it's still not opening. All right, I had to force this side off. And if you know anything about Apple, they're very keen on what their products feel like when they're opening. All right, so here we go. So right away you can see that's not worked. All right, so they say designed by Apple California, and they do include all of the paperwork here, as you can see. And of course, one thing I've noticed, the quality of the paper and the print, it looks like Apple. However, the print quality is very poor, and this is what it usually looks like. And of course, you can see the documentation here. Documentation. All right, so of course, here again, this is the fakes. I'll put them right here. And this is very flimsy. And you do get this cable. Now, let's check out this cable and what it looks like. All right, so this is some cheap plastic. It's much firmer in Apple's devices. Also, this paper, it feels different when you tear it. All right, so of course they give me a Type-C cable to what seems like a lightning, old lightning connector. All right, so I do not know what's happening here in terms of this, but whatever. It can also charge wirelessly, I think. All right, so Apple devices get a 10 out of 10 in unboxing every time. It's perfect. This one gets like maybe a 3 or 4 out of 10 in terms of unboxing. All right, and of course here comes the big reveal. So this is the plastic. Straight away, I'm having issues. The plastic doesn't feel bad, but of course here's what you get. So we're gonna put this aside here, and this is what the AirPods look like. And it has a button on the back. The originals don't. There's a light at the front, and of course it looks like it. And first red flag is that there are no speakers on the base here. This is a old, I don't remember, I think it's called a lightning connector or whatever they call it. It's not USB Type-C. And of course the LEDs here, but it looks like it overall. And you can see the button on the back. There's not supposed to be a button here. All right, so here we have the originals. And of course, this one is wider, but you can see here the material in terms of it does look at a glance like it. You can see here. So both of them are roughly glossy the same. And of course, the missing speakers, this is the fake, this is the real. And of course, there's no button on the back of the ANC 4, which is the AirPods 4 ANC. Hinges look like it at a glance. And of course, you can see this is USB Type-C, this is lightning connector. All right, so let's look at what it looks like on the inside. I'll try to move my phones so they don't detect this. All right, so let's open it up. All right, so first red flag, as I open it up, the hinge is very flimsy. I can actually feel it. When I open this, it's a satisfying opening. It's very firm, and you hear the snap. Listen to this. This is plastic and finicky. All right, next thing, I noticed that this didn't power on when I opened the case. So that's also another red flag. I'll have to plug this in. Again, check out the hinges on the original. All right, so let's look at these until I charge them. And of course, we see here that this area is much larger. And of course, I can see here that the mesh that's here, there's a very fine mesh. Instead of the mesh covering the entirety of this section here, it only connects a section. I can also notice, and I'm going to close this one a bit, the buds themselves when I remove them. All right, they look like the original, however, they feel light. They don't feel as firm as the originals, and these feel like plastic and finicky. All right, and I can feel the cheapness in these. The hinges is wrong. The feel of these is wrong. All right, so notice that it stretches around except for a section of the side at the base here. There's the stem here, and you can see the section here. And I'll try to show you on this one as well without mixing them up. This one is what? The right, and I'm gonna use the left in this one. All right, so you can see here that this is very small while this is very wide. All right, next thing, this thing is huge, this one is small. You can notice the speaker grill here. I can actually see through this grill. I can't see through this one. I don't know if you can see it. Look, you can actually see through. I cannot see through this. Here is the very tiny grill, and if we look here, this one is smaller, this one is larger. You can see this section here as well. So compare them. You can pause at any time. All right, you can see the base. All right, in terms of size, this one is larger, this one is smaller. All right, so we're gonna do a little test by powering these up. All right, so I plugged them in. They actually started to charge, so that's promising. All right, guys, so I've given it enough time to charge. All right, so I've given it enough time to charge. All right, let's see if we'll hear a charging sound. I hear no charging sound, although it has no speakers. All right, so that's a red flag again. All right, so we're gonna see if it detects with the iPhone. I have unpaired my previous device. Make sure it's unpaired because I'm seeing it in the gadgets. All right, so now for the moment of truth. All right, so I notice it doesn't auto-detect it, but I'll try something else. All right, so they don't pair automatically. I'm not sure if because I had my previous ANC paired connected, but I'm gonna connect through Bluetooth and see what happens. All right, so they show up as AirPods. I see them here. It says AirPods up at the top. There you go, they say connected. If I tap on them, they show my other AirPods, which is not this current set. Okay, so it shows both AirPods. It shows my first set of AirPods, which is number 1. It says not connected. However, it says record as AirPods, which is number 2, and it's saying that these are also connected. I'm gonna rename these to make sure they're more distinguishable. All right, guys, so I've set them up. So basically, guys, I've noticed that they looks just the same. It gives it all of the features. So it's even showing up in Find My. I'll have to blur out any serial numbers. I'm not seeing any ANC functions such as active noise cancelling or translation features, but of course a lot of stuff are here. It even shows Find My, so I'm going to see if those work. They do work in Find My. As you hear, I'm sounding them and they're actually sounding, so that's surprising. They also show up on the map in Find My, so that's to be noted. All right, they show battery health. You can rename them, and they show up in Find My. As I was just saying, they show that they have spatial audio, but they do not show some of the more advanced features such as active noise cancelling and so on. So a lot of stuff are here, including microphone, battery, but under battery the options are limited. All right, these say that they are charged the case to 50% and the buds are charged to 100. All right, so I'm not sure. I only gave it like 15-20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes max charge. All right, and you can see here, this is them 100% and 50 for the case, and these are my other AirPods that it's still showing. So of course they're detecting fine. I'm going to close the case again, and I'm going to open, and I'm still not seeing them pop up. Alright guys, so they show up with head tracking, so they show that I can turn it off, and fix. I'm going to listen to some music, and I'm going to also listen to some regular simple content or media. All right, guys, so I've listened to some music on these. So in terms of excuse me. All right, so I've tested YouTube a bit to play some content. So in terms of regular content of people speaking, it's flat, and of course you don't hear much highs. In terms of the music, is just flat in terms of content. Also, the head tracking doesn't work, although I can turn it on, as you just saw. Right, so it does nothing literally. Of course, sometimes it, in terms of music, the bass, there's literally no bass. The music is simply flat, and these are averages at best. And of course, there's nothing spectacular about these. All right, so these are definitely not Apple in terms of quality. Trust me, if you ever listen to the official ones as seen here, guys, you would throw these away. All right, so these are cheap and aftermarket. So of course, in case you're wondering. All right, some of the things that surprised me is that the stems actually work. When you actually press them, they actually pause and play the sound. So that's surprising. Most times that feature doesn't work. Also, from time to time, the voice control pops up. Also, when I place them in my ears, they auto detect that they're actually in the ear. It doesn't work as smooth as the Apple ones, but that's another feature that actually they have somehow built in. I do not know how it detects it, but it does. The controls are also finicky in terms of they will automatically start playing. Battery percentages tend to spike. I'm not sure if it's because of two AirPods being connected. However, I've noticed sometimes voice control will pop up for no reason at all. I've never seen that on the originals. They can't seem to decide whether they are charged or partially charged, so that's inaccurate, although they show up. Guys, also when they reconnect as AirPods, and so they're actually showing up. I think it's because it's a second device, but they should have popped up. The major pop-up doesn't show, but they're there. You can notice as well, it does have the text on the inside here. You can notice the charging points on the inside of the case, but of course this flimsy lid gives it away. It makes a sound that doesn't compare to the real device as well. All right, so here's the things that I've seen that give them away. One, this grill right here, you'll notice that you can actually see on the inside if I get it just right. That's not the way it is on the Apples. All right, next thing, you can see some of these here, such as here, it doesn't cover, this grill doesn't cover, I can actually see the mesh, and it only covers a small portion. All right, so you can see on the inside here, that's not the ones on the Apple. I'm not sure what this is. This might just be a textured thing. Likewise, this one here. All right, also has the text on here, so that's not an indicator. This thing is way too wide. On Apple, it's just a small one. It's very precise when it enters the case. All right, no speakers, flimsy opening and closing, and the sounds are wrong. Also, stuff simply pops up sometimes. It does detect as AirPods sometimes. Let me close this. All right, so it does show up as AirPods sometimes, just as you see there. However, the big pop-up doesn't happen. It might just be a configuration with mine. The battery goes random, and overall, the sound quality really sucks. All right, if I shine a light in the lid right here, and I'm trying to be thorough, you can see something in the midsection here that doesn't seem right. And of course, if I shine in the base, you'll see nothing. So there's some weird hinge here and mechanisms on the inside. I don't know if you can see that on the camera. So guys, the lid does give it away. So always check the lid, open and close sound, and the wonkiness of the lid. All right, so I hope that explains it in terms of what to look out for. All right, so this is the official one. Again, just to show you again, you can see firm, very satisfying to close. There's some text in both sides, upper corners. You can see these. You cannot see inside of the grill. The speaker mesh is very fine. It's so fine I can barely see it. I can't even see the meshing. You can see this. The texture here is very smooth. That thing before felt like it was sticked on. You can see the hinge right there. You can see on the inside of the originals. You can see the speaker grill and USB Type-C. The back, there's no button. There's a touch button on the front. Alright guys, I'm going to wrap up in terms of the real versus the fake. And do I recommend the fakes? Never. This thing costs like $20 and you actually see it. It's very poor. And of course, a very poor imitation. And I suggest that you actually save up and get a AirPods 4 with ANC. There's so much here. It blows this one out of the water. It doesn't even compare. This gets like a 9 out of 10 or even higher, up to probably 9.5 out of 10, while minus some small issues, which probably fix in future updates or software updates. While this, I would probably give this like a 2, maybe 3 out of 10. This basically just gives you sound and it gives you some finicky features. While it does show up in Find My, and of course it shows some advanced features such as the head tracking, it's not actually doing anything. The software, it does trick the software and it partially connects in terms of popping up as AirPods, but that's about it. And I can tell you right now, in terms of money spent, this is basically a waste of time. So I never recommend these. Do get yourself some original Apple AirPods, guys. It will really be worth it, especially in terms of sound quality. I try to be as detailed with the question with the difference. If you have any direct questions that you want to know, such as what makes these two different, you can ask them in the comments. I'll directly answer. I'll not answer anything pertaining to where you can get these. But of course, these fakes are rubbish. I'd recommend no one to get these fakes, but actually to get the originals. All right. So I'll end the guide here as well to tell the difference between the 4s, which is the AirPods 4 with ANC versus these. All right. So I hope you enjoy the guide and see you for future comparisons. I'll go a little bit different next time in terms of comparing them. All right. See you next one, guys. Bye.